So thank you again, Dr. Maneksha, for your introduction, and thank you to all Premier Wellbeing team for inviting me this wonderful evening to have the opportunity to present our company, products and science in front all of you guys. Devicare is a specialty biotech company located in Barcelona. Here you can see our wonderful building, dedicated to developing innovative medical treatments in urology, and only in urology. Devicare is known because it is investigating different innovative mechanisms of action, and one of them is based on the effective modulation of the urine pH and its impact on the urine metabolome and urine microbiome for the treatment and prevention of different common urogenital diseases. Today, I'm going to share with you very briefly some of our learnings in kidney stone disease and in urinary tract infection. Okay. So for kidney stones, we developed LitControl, that is probably today the most effective and comprehensive medical treatment around the world. And why we did it? Because, as my colleague Dr. Galan has explained before, the prevalence, the incidence, the recurrence, and the economic impact of this disease is increasing all over the world, despite of all technological advances in interventional procedures, and because in parallel, there is a lack of effective medical treatments and preventive measures to reduce the burden of this disease. So what we have learned is that the formation of a kidney stone depends mainly on the urine composition and the urine pH. Urine is always supersaturated in calcium oxalate, but below pH 5.5, as we have seen before, is supersaturated in uric acid, and above pH 6.2 is supersaturated in phosphate salts like calcium phosphate or ammonium magnesium phosphate. But in the short range between 5.5 and 6.2, there is an area where the precipitation of the main components of a stone is difficult to occur. Okay? This is why we call this area as the protective zone of kidney stone disease. So if, as a company, we are able to create new medical treatments with the capability to modulate the urine pH of the patient and bring this urine pH inside the protective zone, we are going to reduce the supersaturation of the main components, except calcium oxalate, and reduce the risk of crystallization, the risk of precipitation, the risk of litogenesis. And if we are able to find specific inhibitor agents for each type of crystal, uric acid, cysteine, calcium oxalate, struvite, we are going to reduce also the crystallization process itself, the nucleation, the aggregation, and growth. So this is what we have done with LitControl. LitControl allows us to have, for the first time, a personalized stone approach, where we have a specific product to treat each type of stone. Let's see one by one very briefly, okay? LitControl PH Down is the first line treatment. It is the only one of the market that inhibits calcium-based stones without changing the urine pH, and this part is very important. LitControl PH Balance is intended for calcium-based stones, and it's also intended for those patients where we don't know the type of stone. The composition of LitControl PH Balance is mainly based on phytate to inhibit the crystallization of calcium oxalate and calcium phosphate, polyphenols to increase the level of antioxidants and to avoid the renal tissue damage, and magnesium to form soluble complexes with the oxalate and reduce the free oxalate in the urine. So the main mechanism of action of LitControl PH Balance is the inhibition of calcium salts crystallization without altering the urine pH. The duration of the treatment is at least 6 months, but is a chronic treatment for this type of patients. The recommended daily dose is 2 capsules per day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, and it is a product gluten-free, dairy-free, and also vegan. In several studies with LitControl PH Balance, we have demonstrated that this product is more effective and safer than potassium citrate for calcium oxalate stones. For instance, on the first picture from Grasses and coworkers, you can see comparison between phytate and citrate as inhibitors of crystallization of calcium oxalate. On the left side, you can see the crystals of calcium oxalate in the absence of any type of inhibitors. In the middle, you can see the same crystals in presence of citrate. And on the right side, you can see the same crystals in presence of phytate. So only with this experiment, it is very clear that phytate, it is a better inhibitor of crystallization growth than citrate. But below this picture, you can see the results of Conte et al. In 1999, very interesting results, where they demonstrated that only with 120 milligrams per day of phytate, you can obtain the same efficacy than with 6,500 milligrams per day on citrate, 6 tablets per day of citrate. So that means that with 54 times less dosage, you obtain the same efficacy than with the current treatment into the market. And as you can see on the left, on this image, the phytate didn't change the pH. So here you have the patients before taking citrate. Here, after taking citrate, the pH increased. This is something that we already know. But after taking phytate, the pH is more or less the same. So this is why we say the LitControl PH balance is the most effective product for your calcium oxalate stone former patients, and without altering the level of pH when it is not necessary to do it. The second product on the list is LitControl PHF. This is probably the best product of the market for uric acid stone former patients in terms of safety, efficacy, tolerability, and posology. The indication is uric acid stone former patients, and the composition is potassium magnesium citrate. Again, it is potassium magnesium citrate, not only potassium citrate. We reduce the level of potassium here because we want to avoid any potential contraindication, any potential side effect in patients with cardiovascular comorbidities associated to potassium. And we have also incorporated in our composition a new molecule that is theobromine. Theobromine is the only inhibitor that exists today, natural inhibitor that exists today for uric acid crystallization. So the mechanism of action is a synergistic effect between increasing the level of urine pH due to the citrate and inhibiting the uric acid crystallization with theobromine. Again, the duration of the treatment is at least 6 months. Depending on your target, if you want oral chemolysis, you want to dissolve the uric acid stones, maybe you need to take more dosage during 3-6 months. But if you want to prevent the uric acid stone, our recommendation is at least 6 months of 2 capsules per day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. But again, a patient with uric acid crystallization, a patient with excess of uric acid in the urine and a low pH is a patient that requires to take this product chronically. And as the rest of the products, it is gluten-free, dairy-free, and vegan. In several studies, we have demonstrated the superiority of LitControl PHF for the treatment of uric acid stone former patients. For instance, in this picture from Grasses et al. Again, you can see a comparison of uric acid crystals in the absence of theobromine and in presence of 20 milligrams liter of theobromine at the same pH. So it is clear that theobromine is an inhibitor of crystal growth of uric acid. Below this picture, you can also see a very interesting result of the crystallization time. On the left, you can see a urine supersaturated in uric acid at a pH 4.5. At this level of pH, the uric acid precipitates and crystallizes very quickly. Actually, in less than 5 minutes, we have crystallization. But when we add 20 milligrams of theobromine, we multiply per 5 the delay of crystallization. Now, if we modulate a little bit the level of pH, only passing from 4.5 to 4.65, only this tiny change, it is enough to show a magic synergistic effect. We can see how the Uric acid crystallization in the absence of theobromine is, again, more or less the same, 5 minutes. But when we add 20 milligrams of theobromine, we multiply per 12 the delay time of crystallization. So this is why we say the LitControl PHF is the most effective product for uric acid stone formed patients. And the last product on the list is LitControl PH Down. This is the best product for the market for struvite stone formed patients in terms of safety, and again, efficacy, tolerability, and posology. It is intended for infection-related stones. It is composed by L-methionine, an amino acid, a natural amino acid, to decrease the level of urine pH, and phytate, again, to inhibit the calcium phosphate crystallization that is formed at a high level of pH. So the mechanism of action is very similar. It's a combination of decreasing the level of pH and inhibiting a specific type of crystal. The duration of the treatment is 6 months at least, and the recommended daily dose is 2 capsules per day. And again, it's gluten-free, dairy-free, and vegan. So what we have seen in several studies is that the efficacy of LitControl PH Down is very high for this type of crystals, for struvite crystals and infection-related stones. And today, L-methionine is even recommended by the EAU clinical guidelines. For instance, on the left, on the screen, you can see the results of Sinner et al. Demonstrating how a single dosage of 1,500 milligrams per day in the morning can decrease the level of urine pH during all the day of the patient. And on the right side, you can see again the results of Galan et al. From 2019 in the Premier Wellbeing study, where with 2 capsules per day of LitControl PH Down, 1,000 milligrams per day of L-methionine, you can also decrease the level of urine pH after 30, 60, and 90 days, keeping the pH very near to the protective zone where the calcium phosphate cannot precipitate. These 3 LitControl products have been clinically proven in more than 20 clinical trials and 15 case reports already published in different journals. But we continue generating more and more clinical evidence to help urologists and nephrologists to understand better our work and to understand better how our products have efficacy and how our products work. And because of this intensive scientific research, LitControl products are today available in more than 50 countries around the world, and our ambition is to arrive to the rest of them in a period of 10 years. So the take-home message for this first part of my lecture is that LitControl is the most effective and comprehensive medical treatment for kidney stone disease, allowing you to offer personalized stone approach to your patients. LitControl PH Balance for calcium-based stones, and also for those patients where the stone type is not known. LitControl PH Up for uric acid stones, and LitControl PH Down for infectious stones. So now, in the second part of my lecture, I would like to share with you very briefly our learnings in UTIs and its relationship again with the urine pH. As we all know, antibiotic resistance is a serious global health issue. And according to the World Health Organization, 10 million people will die every year by 2050 with antibiotic resistance related infections. Because of that, there is an urgent need, not only for Devicare, but for all the pharmaceutical industry, to find new effective and non-antibiotic treatments for UTIs. And Devicare is working intensively in this field. We have learned 3 things that I want to share today. The first learning is that there is a clear link between urine pH and uropathogens. Urine pH is affected by, and at the same time affects, the urinary microbiota. The urine pH has a range between 4 and 8. The mean urine pH in healthy adults is 6. And according to some authors, a urine pH above 7.5 is a single indicator of urinary tract infections. As you can see on the table from Han Chen et al., even in children, the mean urine pH is higher during a UTI episode for almost all types of uropathogens, both for Escherichia coli, Proteus, Klebsiella, Enterococcus, Pseudomonas, and so on. The second learning is that there is a link between urine pH and antibiotics efficacy, because each antibiotic molecule has a specific pKa, and depending on the urine pH, the antibiotic molecule may be in its ionized form, making more difficult the penetration through the cell membrane of the bacteria and showing a reduced bioactivity. And any antibiotic that is not in its optimal bioactive form causes antibiotic resistance. You can see on this table adapted from Young et al. How we have different antibiotics like nitrofurantoin or fosfomycin that we should administrate at a low level of pH below 6. And on the right, you can see other types of antibiotics that we should administrate at a high level of pH above 7. If we don't give the proper antibiotic for the patient at the proper urine pH, we are going to cause antibiotic resistance. So the management of the pH is key in the management of antibiotics. The third learning, and the last one, is that urine pH may be used as a treatment for UTIs. As Carlson et al. Demonstrated in 2003, 20 years ago, a low urine pH stimulates the production of nitrogen oxides with bactericidal effect. Let's see how it works very, very quickly. Dietary and endogenous nitrates are excreted in the urine. Actually, 60% of dietary nitrates are excreted in the urine. When we don't have a UTI, nothing happens. But during an UTI episode with nitrate-reducing bacteria, that almost 95% of the bacteria, nitrates are reduced to nitrates. And this is why we use multiparametric strips to measure not only the level of urine pH, but also the level of nitrates, because nitrates are an indirect biomarker of the presence of an infection. What is interesting is that at low pH, this nitrate is spontaneously converted to nitric oxide and other nitrogen oxides that are toxic to the bacteria. So if we stimulate this nitric oxide pathway, we can create a toxic environment for these bacteria. And you can see here in this graph, on the graph on the left, you can see here a urine with a colony of E. coli fed with nitrate. And at the beginning, they are in a presence of a pH 7. And you can see how the number of viable bacteria grows with the time. At a certain point, we change the level of pH to 5.5. And you can see how the number of viable bacteria start to decrease. This is a clear bactericidal effect. On the right, you can see the growth curve of the same bacteria, E. coli bacteria, at different levels of pH. And you can see how at a pH of 5, there is no growth. This is a bacteriostatic effect. So in conclusion, the modulation of the urine pH may be used as an effective medical treatment for UTI, both during the acute phase, the stage 1 of the disease, by optimizing the bioactive form of the antibiotics and increasing their efficacy against the bacteria, facilitating the penetration on the cell membrane. During the preventive phase of the UTI, we can also stimulate the production of nitrogen oxides that are toxic to the bacteria. And more importantly, without creating any antibiotic resistance. And this is a treatment concept behind Devicare's research on UTIs, where we hope in the future to bring new products to the market very, very, very soon.